My name's Steve Prescott. I'm a fantasy illustrator, and I work a lot on Magic. What got me inspired with fantasy artwork was kind of a backdoor path because I wasn't really into fantasy that much as a kid. Like I was much more into sci-fi and like Rambo and Red Dawn, like warfare type stuff. So like when I was going into college, I was just drawing Space Marines. Like I watched Predator and Terminator and Aliens. Like that was my jam. And fantasy a little bit, like I like Conan the Barbarian, but it wasn't like I wasn't drawing that kind of stuff at all. So like my first job out of college was working on contemporary horror with White Wolf. So I was doing a lot of vampires and werewolves. So that was a little bit more contemporary, but you're getting into fantasy, right? Because there's a lot of werewolves and other horrible monsters. So it was like the gateway drug to getting into fantasy. And then like I did that forever and worked on some Shadowrun, so I was doing more sci-fi stuff. And then around 2000 is when I got a job with the Wizards of the Coast. They wanted me to work on some D&D product. I think it was Forgotten Realms specifically. So that was where like I got my toe into fantasy, and it stuck because those jobs were just as fun. I was like, why did I avoid this so much? Like this is fun too. And they were giving me more consistent jobs that paid better, so I just went more and more into D&D and Forgotten Realms, and then a few years later it was Magic the Gathering, and now it's like I barely do any of that other stuff. Now I predominantly do like all sorts of fantasy, high fantasy or whatever. So that was my way in, and I never would have guessed, like as a teenager, if you would have said, are you going to be a fantasy artist? No, I'm going to do sci-fi, man. My influences when I was a kid came from like G.I. Joe and Transformers, like those like cartoon stuff. But really is like, I think my illustration or my illustrator trajectory started with like movies. So it's like it starts with, like Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I liked Star Wars, but that wasn't really the catalyst. It was like I needed more violent stuff. So it was like Red Dawn and First Blood and Commando, and like I liked war movies, and then I liked the sci-fi movies too. So like when I saw Terminator on VHS, like this is tremendous. And then like when it came to like seeing Aliens and Predator in the theater, like I was 13 at the time when Aliens came out. It was a rated R movie, but somehow my buddy across the street who was a year younger than me, somehow we got into that theater. We didn't sneak in. I think they just didn't care. But anyway, like Aliens, like the moment I saw that movie totally changed everything for me. I'm like, that's what I'm going to draw. I'm going to draw that stuff for the next 7 years straight. And so that's what I did. But I think it was movies more than anything. Like I had influences. I liked other illustrators and stuff. Like I'd see them on book covers. But it was those kind of mid to late 80s sci-fi movies. And those got me into comic books too, because I wasn't into superheroes. But I got into the Dark Horse comics with that, and so then I got into comic books, on the coattails of the movie stuff. So that's when I started to draw like the artist that drew in the comic books. So like I'm telling you, it really changed everything. Like right about that age, I was like, I love this stuff, and I won't have any girlfriends for a while. I was working on D&D for maybe like 3 or 4 years, I'd say, and Magic was like this other world to me, like where like my peers that I looked up to worked in that world. Like Mark Zug and Todd Lockwood, Matt Cavada, like these masters were working on this game, and I'm like, I'm not that good. Like, it intrigued me, but I was like, I'm getting stuff from D&D, and this is really fun. So it was like, it felt like something that like the next tier artist did to me. So I didn't like go out of my way to like, I got to get in there right away. Whether or not I could have, I'm not sure. But like, anyway, it came to be that all those art directors kind of worked in the same realm. They're rubbing elbows and they're looking over each other's shoulders. So like the D&D department was right next to the Magic department at that time. I don't know if it is now. Probably Magic is like 5 floors and D&D is 1 floor. But I like one of the art directors that was the art director at the time at Magic. I went out there and did some concept work for D&D, and so I got to meet this guy, and he saw my work. He liked my work working on that. So he sent me a message saying like, "Hey, we got a couple pieces. Like, I'd love to see what you can do with." I forget what it's called. Like, it was a tree folk guy, and then an angel. Like, these 2 pieces were my first pieces for Magic, and I'm like, that would be great. I'm super intimidated, but I will do that. So that was my foot in the door. Like, I love and both hate saying that story, because like to kids, you want to say like, oh, you got to put your work in, and like get in front of an art director and like do all the labor to get yourself in front of the right person at the right time that's going to hire you. And for me, it was kind of like they came to me, that's not a common case. To just like, you shouldn't just wait there for an art director to come to you eventually, be proactive. But in this case, the art director came to me and got me into the door for that.